In the name of the one who loves the beloved and love itself. Amen. Please be seated. Been here about 4 years almost. We'll be in September. That's right, so 3.5 years. Yeah. I've been tracking the seasons in Sacramento. So far I've counted 14. So by my count we have winter. We have Fool's Spring. That was on Monday and Tuesday. Then we have second winter. That's where we are now. Then we have the Spring of Deception, also known as the Pollinating. Then we have third winter, and then road construction season. We have the Mosquito Spring, and then we have California Summer, which lasts from May 5th to May 8th. And then we have Satan's Armpit Summer. I cleaned that up a bit. And then we have Wildfire Season, and then False Fall, and then Jalapeno Summer, and then Actual Fall. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm enjoying the seasons. Not all of them, most of them. I'm enjoying the fact of seasonality. We get detached from seasons in our modern world. When it gets too cold, we heat our houses. When it gets too warm, we cool them down. When it gets too dark, we turn lights on. You know, we're a bit detached in the modern world from our technology, from seasons. And some people get seasonal affective disorder, where it gets a bit dark and cold and they feel a bit down. But maybe they're just doing what people in the Middle Ages did, which was to slow down when it gets dark. And it may be interesting to you to note that we have built a bunch of festivals right the way through winter that are all related to light. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Christmas, we light things. We light things at Epiphany. They're all about light coming into the world. And CandleMass is a festival about light. In the Episcopal Church, it's called the Presentation of Christ in the Temple. Its old name was CandleMass. And this falls on the 2nd of February, which may be a familiar date to you, from Groundhog Day. Punxsutawney Phil apparently came out on Friday and did not see his shadow, so that means that spring will be coming early. Did you track all of that? The 2nd of February, I don't know if you know, is the cross quarter day. I like this little fact. It's halfway between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And in some people's thoughts, it's that time of year when you might notice that the light's returning. The light is coming back. And we need it, especially when it's been a long, dark winter. We need the light. In our former agrarian culture, February 2nd was the date that farmers would go out and they would assess the quality of the light to figure out when to plant their crops. So the whole Punxsutawney Phil kind of thing that was made famous by that movie, that was really about farmers saying, do I think it's going to be an early spring, looking at the weather around me? Do I plant my crops in February or do I wait till March? The pagan festival Imbolc is on February the 2nd. And it's about recognizing that growth is beginning under the surface. Now, I don't know if you realize, but in the Christian church, we basically inserted many of our festivals into some pre-existing festivals that existed in the pre-Christian, pagan Christian Europe and also in Rome. So Christmas was actually a sun god's festival in bulk on February the 2nd. We put CandleMass in there. So I don't have a problem with that. We quite like to see the flow of the year and to enter into it with some of our festivals. And where does the light exist in CandleMass? Well, it's in that moment in the middle of the reading where Simeon, the old man of God, comes into the temple, sees Mary and Joseph with the baby Jesus, walks up to them, looks into the face of the child, and sees salvation. He says in the Nunc Dimittis, that song that he sings, or the prayer he recites that we've turned into a song, he says in the face of the child, I see the light to lighten the Gentiles and the glory of Israel. The light is in the face of the infant. And Simeon says something actually quite tender. He says, Lord, now let your servant depart in peace. Or to put it a different way, I can die now in peace because I've seen the light of salvation in the face of this child. And so in ancient tradition, churches would gather all the candles that they had made for the year to come and bless them on this day, because in the face of the child, we see the light of God. And in the candles that we light all year long in church, every one of them is symbolic of the light of Christ burning in the church. And so we've left that creche up this year until today so that we can see the baby born there as the light of Christ in the world, and we've lit some candles around it. And in front of it, you might want to go and have a look, are some of the candles that we'll be using in the year to come, which we'll say a prayer of blessing over later. And I don't know about you, but I really need the light to start dawning. I don't know what you might be wrestling with, what darkness you might be facing. Grief over a lost loved one. Or just turning on the TV every morning and seeing the darkness in the world, warfare in the Holy Land. Our leaders talking at cross purposes against one another, and the polarization that we see in our culture. Maybe you're anticipating a dark year as we enter into an election year, and it seems that everyone just wants to fight rather than resolve things. I don't know what darkness you are facing, but our faith speaks of light. Now, I really quite enjoyed the family service today. We told the gospel narrative that you just saw, or you just heard, but we told it in a pageant form. And so a young couple, Itzi and Robert, brought baby Pascal as Jesus up to the front, and Rick Keneally came out dressed up in a costume and was Simeon, and he took the baby in his arms and he chanted the Nunc Dimittis. And then after that, Susan Hotchkiss came out, also dressed up in a costume, and played the prophet Anna and preached to the congregation about the joy that she saw in the face of the child. It's a reminder to me that the story of light is not just an ancient historic story, but is one that is woven through our community today. And that we can communicate light from one person to the next as we recognize that Simeon and Anna, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, are archetypes that we can fulfill. So where are you in that story? A young family with a child. Are you a child? Are you one of the elders in the community? Let me say it delicately to you all. Are you one of the elders in the community? Have you internalized light through your faith over many years? Are you willing and able to look into the face of the children of our community and see in them hope for the future? Are you able, when you look into their faces and see hope for the future, to name it, to encourage them, to be delighted by them, to share joy with them, and perhaps to even mentor them in faith, and invite them to recognize that there is light in our faith even when the world looks dark around us? You know, I preached on the New Year's Eve. Where was I? Oregon. My brain's gone back. Portland. I was in Portland. That's right. And I preached, and it was on the text from John 1. And the line that I pulled out of the text from John 1 is the line that says, "The light shined in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." Which is really encouraging to me. Except that translation is one of the modern translations from the New Revised Standard Version, and I quite like the King James translation of that text. The word for overcome is katalaban in the Greek, and in the King James Version they translate that phrase, the light shined in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. It wasn't about overcoming. It was about understanding. Sometimes I think we feel like the light of Christ is in opposition to the darkness of the world, and we have to take opposition up against the people we disagree with and fight for the light. And that's one way of looking at things. But another way of looking at them is that God just asks you to shine with light in the world and not be in opposition to anything. And the darkness just isn't going to understand what you're doing. And that's okay, because darkness is darkness, and we shine with light as much as we can in the world. And if more of us can shine with the light of Christ in the world, there'll be greater light. So people aren't going to understand what you're doing when you're trying to shine with light in the world. But do it anyway. People are going to argue with you. But do it anyway. You might think it's not enough, but do it anyway. You might think that your light isn't quite bright enough, but shine with whatever light you have anyway. In our faith, we are offered light in the face of the baby Jesus, the light of salvation. Those of us who have learned about it and internalized it, please share it with others. Particularly if you're listening to the nuances of this CandleMass story, if you are one of the mature members of the community, I say delicately again, don't make me a liar. Look into the faces of the children and share your light with them, because they need to see it. And when they share their light with you, be delighted by it and encourage them. The more we do this, the more light there will be in the world. Thank you. Amen.